The autumn rain drummed against the tall windows of Ravenshire Palace, creating a melancholy soundtrack that seemed to echo through every corridor. Princess Elena sat in the grand library, her fingers trembling as she held the letter that had arrived that morning. The royal seal was broken, the parchment slightly damp from her tears. 8-year-old Prince Alexander burst through the library doors, his golden curls bouncing as he ran toward his mother. His bright blue eyes, so much like his father's, sparkled with the innocent joy that only children possess. "Mama, when is Papa coming home?" he asked, climbing onto the velvet chair beside her. "You promised we would go riding together when he returned from his diplomatic mission." Elena's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. The letter in her hands contained news that would destroy her son's world forever. Prince Marcus, Alexander's beloved father and Elena's husband of 10 years, had been killed in a tragic accident while traveling through the mountain passes of the neighboring kingdom of Valdris. "Sweetheart," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Come here to Mama." But before she could find the words to explain the impossible, the library doors opened again. This time, it was Duchess Victoria, Marcus's stepmother, who had never quite accepted Elena into the royal family. Victoria's silver hair was perfectly arranged despite the early hour, and her sharp green eyes immediately assessed the situation. "Still waiting for Marcus to return, I see," Victoria said, her voice carrying an edge that made Elena's blood run cold. "How long will you keep living in this fantasy, Elena?" Alexander looked between the two women, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. "Grandmother Victoria, do you know when Papa is coming back?" Victoria's expression softened slightly when she looked at the boy, but her next words were like daggers. "Alexander, darling, sometimes people go away and they don't come back. Your father, he isn't coming home." "Victoria!" Elena gasped, rising from her chair so quickly that the letter fell to the floor. "You have no right." But the damage was done. Alexander's face crumpled as the meaning of Victoria's words sank in. "What do you mean he isn't coming back?" "Papa promised. He promised he would teach me to fence when he returned." The little prince's voice rose to a wail that seemed to echo through the vast library. Elena rushed to comfort him, but Alexander pushed her away, his small fists pounding against her arms. "You're lying. Both of you are lying. Papa is coming back," Alexander screamed, his sobs growing louder and more desperate with each word. Elena felt her knees buckle under the weight of her grief and her son's pain. She collapsed into the chair, her own sobs mixing with Alexander's cries. The sound was heartbreaking, a symphony of loss that seemed to pierce through the very walls of the palace. Victoria stood watching them both, her expression unreadable. "The boy needs to face reality, Elena. As do you. Marcus is gone, and there are decisions that must be made about the succession, about Alexander's future. How can you be so heartless?" Elena whispered through her tears. "He's just a child. He's your grandson. He's the future king," Victoria replied coldly. "And future kings must learn that life is not always kind. The sooner he understands this, the better prepared he will be for what lies ahead." Alexander had thrown himself onto the Persian rug, his small body shaking with the force of his sobs. "I want my papa! I want my papa!" he cried over and over, his voice growing hoarse. Elena tried to reach for him again, but her own grief was overwhelming her. The room seemed to spin as she struggled to breathe. The weight of her loss, combined with the horror of watching her son's innocence shatter, was too much to bear. "Elena, you must compose yourself," Victoria said, though her tone had lost some of its harsh edge. "The servants are already talking. The kingdom cannot see their princess and future king in such a state." But Elena couldn't hear her anymore. The sound of Alexander's cries filled her ears, drowning out everything else. She thought of Marcus's smile, his gentle hands as he taught Alexander to ride, the way he would read bedtime stories with different voices for each character. All of that was gone forever. The palace, which had always been filled with laughter and love when Marcus was alive, now felt like a tomb. Elena realized that nothing would ever be the same again. Not for her, not for Alexander, and not for their kingdom. As the rain continued to fall outside, mother and son grieved together in the library where so many happy memories had been made. Victoria watched them both, her own heart heavy with the burden of the secrets she carried, secrets that would soon change everything they thought they knew about Marcus's death. The future stretched ahead of them like a dark corridor, filled with uncertainty and pain. And this was only the beginning of their journey through the shadows that would soon engulf the crown. 3 months had passed since that terrible day in the library, and Ravenshire Palace had become a place of whispers and shadows. Princess Elena moved through the halls like a ghost, her once bright smile replaced by hollow eyes and pale cheeks. She had tried to be strong for Alexander, but grief had taken its toll on her spirit. Alexander had changed too. The vibrant, laughing child had become quiet and withdrawn. He spent most of his time in his father's study, sitting in the large leather chair and clutching one of Marcus's old riding gloves. His tutors reported that he barely spoke during lessons, and the palace staff worried about the young prince who no longer played in the gardens. On a particularly cold December morning, Elena stood at her bedroom window, watching snow fall on the courtyard where Marcus used to practice his swordsmanship. She had barely eaten in days, and her lady-in-waiting, Margaret, was deeply concerned. "Your Highness," Margaret said gently, entering with a breakfast tray. "You must try to eat something. Prince Alexander needs his mother to be strong." Elena turned from the window, her silk nightgown hanging loosely on her thin frame. "I don't know how to be strong anymore, Margaret. Every day feels like I'm drowning in sadness. Number, 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 number." I would longer propagating. Before Margaret could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. Duchess Victoria entered without waiting for permission, her face stern and determined. Behind her walked a man Elena had never seen before, tall, with silver hair and piercing gray eyes that seemed to see everything. "Elena, we need to talk," Victoria announced. "This is Lord Edmund Blackthorne, our Lizar, the kingdom's chief advisor on royal affairs." Elena pulled her robe tighter around herself, uncomfortable with the stranger's presence. "Victoria, this is hardly the time for—" "This is exactly the time," Victoria interrupted. "Edmund has brought some information that you need to hear. Information about Marcus's death." The room fell silent except for the crackling of the fireplace. Elena felt her heart begin to race. "What do you mean?" "Marcus died in an accident. The mountain pass collapsed during a storm." Lord Blackthorne stepped forward, his voice deep and measured. "Your Highness, I'm afraid there's more to the story than you've been told. Prince Marcus wasn't killed in an accident. He was murdered." Elena felt the world tilt around her. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. "That's impossible. Who would want to hurt Marcus? He was beloved by everyone." "Not everyone," Victoria said quietly. "There are those who never wanted Marcus to inherit the throne. Those who believed his marriage to you weakened the royal bloodline." Elena's mind reeled. "You're talking about the old nobles, the ones who opposed our marriage because I wasn't born into royalty." "Precisely," Lord Blackthorne confirmed. "We have evidence that a group of conspirators, led by Duke Roderick of Thornwick, orchestrated your husband's death. They made it look like an accident, but our spies in Valdris uncovered the truth." Elena sank into the chair, her legs unable to support her anymore. "Why are you telling me this now? Why wait 3 months?" Victoria's expression softened slightly. "Because we needed proof, and because we needed to decide what to do with this information. Elena, these same people now have their sights set on Alexander." The mention of her son's name sent ice through Elena's veins. "What do you mean?" "They want to eliminate the direct line of succession," Lord Blackthorne explained. "With Marcus gone and Alexander still a child, they hope to install Duke Roderick's son, Prince Garrett, as the next king. But Alexander stands in their way." Elena shot to her feet, sudden fierce protectiveness flooding through her. "They will not touch my son. I won't let them." "That's exactly what we hoped you'd say," Victoria replied. "But Elena, there's more you need to know. The Royal Council has been meeting in secret. Some members believe that you're not fit to serve as regent while Alexander grows up. They think your grief has made you unstable. Unstable? Elena's voice rose. I'm grieving my husband. Of course I'm struggling. I know, Victoria said, her voice gentler than Elena had ever heard it. But appearances matter in the royal court. Your withdrawal from public duties, your weight loss, the way you've isolated yourself, it's given your enemies ammunition to use against you. Margaret, who had been quietly listening, stepped forward. Your Highness, there have been rumors among the staff. Some say that you talk to Prince Marcus as if he's still alive. Elena felt heat rush to her cheeks. It was true sometimes, in her darkest moments, she did speak to Marcus's portrait or to his empty chair at dinner. But she wasn't mad. She was just heartbroken. We're not here to judge you, Lord Blackthorne said carefully. We're here to help you fight back. But you need to understand what you're up against. Elena walked to the window again, her mind racing. Outside, she could see Alexander in the courtyard with his bodyguard, Sir Thomas. The little boy was building a snowman, the first time she'd seen him play in months. What do they plan to do? She asked without turning around. There will likely be a formal challenge to your regency, Victoria explained. Duke Roderick will claim that you're mentally unfit to guide Alexander's upbringing and education. He'll propose that his family take guardianship of the prince for his own protection. Elena spun around, her eyes blazing with sudden fury. Over my dead body. That may be exactly what they're hoping for, Lord Blackthorne said grimly. Elena, you're in real danger. Both you and Alexander. The weight of the revelation settled over her like a heavy cloak. Not only had her husband been murdered, but now her son's life was in danger too. The grief that had consumed her for months suddenly transformed into something else entirely, a burning determination to protect her child and honor Marcus's memory. What do I need to do? She asked, her voice steady for the first time in months. Victoria smiled, and Elena caught a glimpse of approval in her stepmother-in-law's eyes. First, you need to start acting like a queen again. Second, we need to gather our allies. And third, we need to be very, very careful about who we trust. Elena nodded, feeling strength she hadn't felt since Marcus's death beginning to flow back into her veins. Her son needed her to be more than a grieving widow. He needed her to be a warrior. Looking out at Alexander playing in the snow, she made a silent promise. No one would harm her child. No one would steal his birthright. And whoever had killed Marcus would pay for what they had done to her family. The game for the crown was just beginning, and Elena was finally ready to play. 6 weeks after learning the truth about Marcus's murder, Princess Elena stood before the great mirror in her chambers, adjusting the sapphire crown that had belonged to Marcus's mother. Today was the day of reckoning, the royal council meeting where Duke Roderick would formally challenge her regency. Elena had spent every day since Victoria's revelation preparing for this moment. She had resumed her royal duties, made public appearances, and most importantly, she had begun to heal. The pain of losing Marcus would never fully go away, but she had learned to channel her grief into determination. Alexander knocked on her door, and she smiled as he entered. The little prince had grown stronger too, though he still carried his father's riding glove in his pocket every day. He wore a small version of the royal uniform, his golden curls neatly combed, looking every inch the future king. "Mama, are you nervous?" he asked, taking her hand. Elena knelt down to his level, her heart swelling with pride. Despite everything he had been through, Alexander had shown remarkable courage. Victoria had been right sometimes. Future kings had to learn early that life could be cruel. A little, she admitted. But I know that right will win today. Your papa always taught me that truth has a way of coming to light. Alexander nodded solemnly. Sir Thomas taught me a new sword move yesterday. He said Papa would be proud. He would be very proud, Elena agreed, kissing his forehead. Now, are you ready to show the council what a real prince looks like? They walked together through the corridors of Ravenshire Palace, their footsteps echoing off the marble floors. Servants bowed as they passed, and Elena noticed the looks of respect and determination on their faces. Word had spread throughout the palace about the threats against the royal family, and the staff had rallied around their princess and young prince. The council chamber was packed when they arrived. Elena had never seen so many nobles and advisors gathered in one place. At the far end of the room sat Duke Roderick, a thick-set man with cold black eyes and a carefully groomed beard. Beside him sat his son, Prince Garrett, who was only a few years older than Alexander but already had the look of someone who believed the world owed him everything. Victoria was already seated at the council table. Along with Lord Blackthorn and several other allies Elena had carefully cultivated over the past weeks. She had been amazed to discover how many nobles had genuinely loved Marcus and distrusted Roderick's ambitions. Lord Chancellor Williams, an elderly man who had served the crown for 40 years, called the meeting to order. His voice boomed across the chamber as he announced the purpose of the gathering. "We are here today to address concerns raised about the regency of Princess Elena and the guardianship of Prince Alexander," he declared. "Duke Roderick has requested permission to present his case." Roderick stood, his black robes making him look like a vulture as he addressed the assembly. "My lords and ladies, we gather today because our kingdom faces a crisis of leadership. Princess Elena, through no fault of her own, has proven unable to handle the responsibilities of regency during her time of grief." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elena remained seated, her face calm and composed, just as Lord Blackthorn had coached her. "Furthermore," Roderick continued, "Prince Alexander, while a lovely child, is far too young to understand the complexities of royal duty. I propose that my family, with our long history of service to the crown, take temporary guardianship of the prince until he comes of age." Elena felt Alexander's small hand squeeze hers under the table. She squeezed back, giving him strength. "Duke Roderick," Elena said, rising gracefully to her feet. "Before you continue, I believe there's something the council should know about your family's service to the crown." Roderick's eyes flashed dangerously. "I don't know what you're implying, Your Highness." Elena nodded to Lord Blackthorn, who stood and produced a leather folder. "We have evidence," Blackthorn announced, "that Duke Roderick and his associates were responsible for the murder of Prince Marcus." The chamber erupted in shocked gasps and angry voices. Roderick's face went pale, but he quickly recovered his composure. "That's a serious accusation," he said coldly. "I hope you have more than rumors and speculation." "We have letters," Elena replied, her voice carrying clearly across the noisy chamber. "Letters in your own handwriting, discussing plans to remove the obstacle to your son's inheritance. We have testimony from the assassins you hired in Valdris, and we have witnesses who saw your men in the mountain passes on the day my husband died." Alexander stood beside his mother, his young voice ringing out clearly. "You killed my papa!" The simple, heartbroken accusation from a child hit the assembly like a thunderbolt. Even Roderick seemed shaken by the directness of it. Lord Blackthorn began reading from the evidence, each piece of proof landing like a hammer blow against Roderick's claims. Letters detailing the conspiracy, payments to mercenaries, plans to make Marcus's death look like an accident, it was all there. But Roderick wasn't finished. He drew himself up to his full height and pointed an accusing finger at Elena. "Even if these wild accusations were true," he shouted, "it doesn't change the fact that this woman is unfit to rule. Look at her, she's been talking to ghosts, neglecting her duties, wasting away with grief." Elena felt the chamber's attention turn to her, and she knew this was the moment that would decide everything. She thought of Marcus, of his strength and wisdom, and she felt him with her as she spoke. "Duke Roderick is right about one thing," she said, her voice steady and strong. "I have been grieving. I have struggled with the loss of the man I loved more than life itself. But grief is not madness, and love is not weakness." She turned to address the entire assembly, her voice growing more powerful with each word. "Yes, I spoke to my husband's memory because I needed his guidance to protect our son. Yes, I withdrew from public life because I was in pain, but when I learned that his death was not an accident, that same love and grief gave me the strength to fight back." Elena placed her hand on Alexander's shoulder. "This child has endured the loss of his father with more grace and courage than most adults could manage. He is Marcus's son in every way that matters, and he will be a great king someday. But until that day comes, I will protect him with my life." The chamber was completely silent now, hanging on her every word. "If you want to judge my fitness to rule," Elena continued, "then judge me by this. I discovered my husband's murderers. I gathered evidence against them, and I'm bringing them to justice. I call that the action of a strong ruler, not a weak one." Lord Chancellor William stood, his aged face grave but determined. "Duke Roderick of Thornwick, you and your co-conspirators are under arrest for treason and murder." Guards, the palace guards, who had been waiting outside, entered and seized Roderick and his son. Roderick struggled against them, his composure finally cracking. "This isn't over," he shouted as they dragged him away. "There are others who will never accept her rule." Elena watched him go, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice for Marcus was finally being served. But she knew Roderick was right. There would always be other challenges, other threats. Alexander tugged on her dress, and she looked down at him. "Mama, does this mean the bad men can't hurt us anymore?" Elena picked him up, holding him close as the council members began to disperse. Many of them stopped to bow to her and pledge their continued loyalty. Victoria approached with a rare smile on her face. "You did well today," Victoria said. "Marcus would have been proud." Elena nodded, feeling tears prick her eyes. But these were different tears, tears of relief and hope rather than despair. "What happens now?" Alexander asked. Elena carried him to the tall windows overlooking the palace gardens, where spring flowers were beginning to bloom despite the winter cold. "Now we rebuild," she said softly. "We honor Papa's memory by being the best rulers we can be. We make our kingdom stronger and safer for everyone." Alexander nodded seriously. "And we remember Papa every day?" "Every day," Elena promised. As they stood together looking out at their kingdom, Elena felt the shadows that had haunted them for so long finally beginning to lift. There would still be challenges ahead, still be people who would question her authority or threaten Alexander's inheritance. But they had proven today that they were stronger than their enemies imagined. The crown would continue to cast its shadows, but Elena and Alexander would face them together, armed with love, justice,